if there's that continuous high stakes thought process without rewiring your brain to ground yourself. It's really important having that posture of knowing that you know what you know, especially negotiation, right? You don't want to be the first person to go.
You are listening to the 5 a.m. podcast, and today is your day. Welcome back to the 5 a.m. podcast, that daily ritual for high performers, dreamers, and builders who refuse to settle for ordinary. I'm your host, Michael Klassen. Before we jump into today's mind-shifting conversation, please do us a quick favor. Hit that follow or subscribe button on whatever app you're listening to right now. Lock it in, and let's grow together. Today, we're diving deep into the intersection of high-stakes resilience, human behavior, and some peak performance. Our guest is a global powerhouse who has shared stages with the likes of Jack Canfield, Jamie Kern-Lima, and Jeff Hoffman. Dr. Shanea Clancy is an entrepreneurial international speaker, a business strategist, and a personal development trainer, as well as an international best-selling author. Now, those are the accolades. Her experience: she's a former forensic nurse turned into executive mindset strategist. Dr. Shanea spent years sitting with the kind of intense trauma and high-stakes human behavior that most people would run from. After rebuilding her own future from scratch, she now gets into the trenches and boardrooms with Fortune 500 companies, top-tier universities, and visionary entrepreneurs. She teaches leaders how to implement trauma-informed leadership, rewire their brains for bulletproof resilience, and blast past those limiting beliefs. Dr. Shanea, welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast.
Hi, Michael. Welcome to your guest, too. Y'all are up at 5 a.m., so I would still be sleeping, quickly putting coffee on. It's
Yes.
so great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, it's great to have you here, and that 5 a.m. harkens back to when those cows needed to be milked, and you didn't get your breakfast till the animals were fed, so you had to get
Get
up
out of here. Did you grow up on a farm?
I sure did, yes. Loved
I
every
did
minute,
too.
mostly every minute of it. That's wonderful news. What kind of farm did you grow up on?
My family has a farm and I raised sheep, and
No way.
those things are stubborn. Yeah, we went to like 4-H and clubs and farm shows. Yeah,
Wow.
what about you?
Oh, sheep farm with some beef.
That's incredible. We had some pigs, so there you go. At least we put some
Oh,
extra
okay,
meat on the
so
table.
yeah, we did not have pigs. My parents would trade for pork. The barter system was alive and well in our life, and that's funny. The whole aspect of sheep, and you need really good fences for sheep. They are stubborn. They don't like to learn, even to their own detriment. Sheep.
They're the dumbest animal. The
Yeah.
dumbest animal on earth. Like, seriously, they're dumb.
Yeah. It can't compute. It's no wonder that the Bible relates people to sheep
This is
and
true.
Christ to the shepherd, because sheep really do need a good shepherd, because if they got a terrible shepherd, they're not coming home.
I love it.
I have this one memory. Some of you might sleep better knowing this, but probably not. And so we had this gate that we would let the sheep out into this forested area that was part of the farm. My older brother and I, we're going out, we're checking on the sheep. They're going out, and there's this one sheep that is like lying on its back with its feet in the air. And we're like, what is the deal with this one? Somehow it had caught itself in the page wire fence and flipped over. And it was just this one little piece of curled metal that it had gotten stuck in, and it just laid there. Poor sheep. But you
Thought you were going to say you went sheep tipping.
Oh, well, no, we were not allowed to tip cows or sheep. My parents said that was cruel. Good times,
Nice.
man.
Yes.
And I still love eating lamb.
Yeah, good lamb chop. Absolutely.
Yes. Uh-huh. And we could go on and on, because it's a delicious meat. We should. Okay, so circling this train back to the station, that little engine that could, Shanea, you were a forensic nurse, and I need to know, like, forensic accounting, forensic nursing. I did not know there was forensic nursing. So could you fill us in on what experiences you would have encountered as a forensic nurse?
Absolutely. I still do forensic nursing.
Oh, okay.
So literally the forensic aspect is like the expert way of saying, hey, I know a lot about this, and that very strong niche, and can kind of piece things apart and solve puzzles. So, as a forensic nurse, most people think of a SANE, which is a sexual assault nurse examiner. That's what everybody defaults to, but really it also encompasses like violent prevention, crisis intervention, workplace, like lateral, horizontal violence, addiction, and mental health. There's a whole like expert witness, crime scene investigation. So I've been trained in blood splatter and ballistics for crime scenes, and yeah, do expert witness chart reviews, especially for suicides, and yeah, quality standard procedure, standard of care.
Sounds like that would be adjacent perhaps to criminology.
Yes, absolutely. So that's how I actually got into the blood splatter and ballistics, was just with one of the folks who led that team at a local police department. He was a sergeant, was like, I'm teaching these classes. Do you want to come learn? I'm like, absolutely.
That's
Yeah, it was with the
fascinating.
Wecht Institute at Duquesne University. So they're one of like the best for forensic everything.
I mean, there's so many career paths that people can get into. And so thank you for sharing that with us, because that's fascinating in and of itself. And of course, I would then draw the conclusion that with forensic nursing, you are placed kind of at that intersection of healthcare and intense trauma and the legal systems. Uh, is there an encounter that you had maybe early on in your career that you could tell us about that really steered you down this path?
Well, that's a great one. I would say an early encounter would be, I don't know my biological father, but my father who raised me since 4, right? I call him dad. He suffered from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, but my mom was stay-at-home mom, kept us kind of shielded from that a little bit. And so just growing up in that atmosphere and, learning that process really got me interested in the mental health aspect, and then the legal justice criminal system for sure as a trained federal mediator. I was like, this is awesome. It really chose me. I wanted to be a flight nurse.
That's a pretty heavy upbringing and experience that you had in that time, because a lot of people still don't really understand the struggles that a family member goes through when they have a parent or another member of the family who is struggling with their mental health. And props to your mom for working with you guys and keeping you safe. So then, what made you want to do the switch from that clinical experience into business?
So I actually was doing my doctorate at Duquesne University, and I said I was done with school because my husband, God bless him, I did like back to back to back schooling, and we have 3 kids. And I was like, I'm going to be done. And I was like, no, I'm not, because I've always wanted to round out and have that business acumen. That way the opportunities open even more. And then I went back postdoc for my executive MBA in healthcare. So that still intersects business and healthcare, but it really pulls out the business aspect that most executives like I work with would need to know. You don't need to know how to do everything. That's why you delegate. And so that's why I took that route.
Wow, fascinating. Yes. Henry Ford actually talked about that very principle of delegation, where he was kind of being grilled. I don't remember if it was by government and some sort of antitrust stuff was going on with him, but he said, I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. I just have to hire him.
Yep. It's all about your team and who you surround yourself with. Quite frankly, if I walk into a room, this is going to sound wild to your high performers. We both are as well, but I would rather walk in at times and be the dumbest person so I can leave learning and reminding myself, hey, I'm coachable and I don't know it all. What can I learn and how can I add value to the person that I'm with?
Let's say we have a mutual friend who's pretty knowledgeable, doesn't need to be the smartest person in the room, like you're saying, but walks in and finds out that everyone is kind of relying on them to not necessarily lead the meeting, but uh, provide the structure for a path forward for this company. Maybe they need to pivot and they're all out of options and guesses. They're expected to give a cursory path forward for the company. But then, weeks and days later, they see that nothing in their presentation is being implemented. And it's just the same old story that the company continues and the person feels like none of their advice was accepted or taken, and the company just continues on down this path to destruction.
You're asking me how would I handle that situation?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So that's so common. More common than
Okay,
not.
well, that's good to know.
Well, I mean, in the consultations that I do for like structural and organization, and quality and safety, I can come in as a consultant. I can give my expertise, but it is not my job to implement it. That's where it's practically like a program evaluation, facility, company organization. What they do with that is really up to them. I can't carry that burden. I know that I've done my due diligence and I will absolutely be available to assist with implementing that if they want me to, but I can't be accountable for somebody that can't be accountable to themselves and their
Yes.
organization.
Right. It's like that old saying, if its and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a heck of a Christmas.
I've never heard that, but I love it.
Uh, yeah. It's been rolling around in my brain this week, so I had to get it out. Yes. Love that
Well, I'm
saying.
glad that I could assist with you of getting that out of your
Thank
head.
you. Yes, thank you. Now, what was the biggest hidden parallel you noticed between a patient in crisis and a corporate team operating under severe strain?
The biggest thing that or aspect I would tie together is the inability to think clearly. And so when you're in that crisis state, your stress and anxiety is automatically going up, right? And so, same with somebody as a crisis patient, it goes up. When it goes up, sorry, your comprehension goes down automatically. So, it's about gaining control and identifying that internal and external dialogue to be able to say, hey, I'm a little stressed out right now, or this, what I'm doing isn't working, as an exec or a team lead might feel. To be able to ground yourself intentionally to decrease that anxiety and increase that comprehension so that both entities can execute efficiently and effectively. If somebody's not de-escalated, it's not going to go very well.
Is a fascinating parallel, and thank you for tying those two together because wouldn't have necessarily thought it was that. And it sounds similar to what we hear from people that might be in a severe life-threatening experience where they talk about how everything just seemed to slow down. I don't know if you
Yeah.
would say there's a parallel there.
Say that there is, in the sense that if you're in a life situation, it slows down the reaction time potentially, but it's also going to be based on training and preparation, right? You think like, I'm going to go a left field for you. Service men and women, they're trained for those situations. A lot of people might do training to counteract those situations and how they would react. But yeah, slowing down would be a good way to put it.
Yes, and then
Fight
that's
or
where
flight or fight or
yes,
flight pretty much
right.
sets in.
Yeah. And then people being able to have the training to know what to do, whether it's in a traumatic situation or a high stakes business situation. Now, you stated that your journey defies the path, the traditional path. Um, what is the fundamental difference maybe between just surviving a chaotic season or experience in life or business and then actually rewiring your brain for that, what we might call peak performance?
Think about it this way. So, survival mode. Most of us are in it and don't realize we're in it. And so it's that constant cortisol level, which increases. That's why, people, if they put on weight when they're stressed, that's what it comes from. But being in that crisis state over time, if there's no outlet, it's going to come out one way or the other. So it's either going to be physically or it's going to come out in performance. And I would say that both are equally important. But when it comes to like tying that together with a business or, a company, high stakes, negotiations and things like that, especially when you're talking millions or billions on the table. If there's that continuous high stakes thought process without rewiring your brain to ground yourself. I know I've said that a couple of times, but it's really important. And also having that posture of knowing that you know what you know. And especially negotiation, right? You don't want to be the first person to go.
Yes, that's right.
Never do you wanna be the first person to
That's
go.
right. Right, the one who speaks first loses? I think that's how it goes.
That
Yeah,
sounds good, I'll roll with it.
yeah. So then, you've and maybe this is part of that loneliness even when you're surrounded by people. They might mean the most to you or the least to you, but, uh, have you found, through your clients and through your work that these high achieving leaders and founders can experience this exact type of isolation or loneliness? And then, how does it quietly maybe sabotage their business or career?
100%. The higher you go, the more isolated it gets, because you can't be friends, in theory, with the managers below you. And so what does that look like? How do you navigate that? So absolutely, the higher up you go, the more lonely it gets. And I don't even say a risk of what could happen, it happens. And when you're looking at that peak performance aspect of it, it's having the agility and the ability to pivot and surround yourself, right? We talked about this earlier with people that are going to not only just hold you accountable, but be an outlet, usually on the outside. I say a lot of people should have a therapist, right? You can just sound a board
Absolutely.
and figure things out, and half the time you already have the answer. It's your therapist is just a sounding board for you that you're paying how much money for. Um, but yeah, I think that has a very strong correlation when it comes to isolation. And then you look at mental health and execution, those
Right.
all get affected.
Yes. And so
That's what,
somebody
sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Okay. Someone might be listening and saying, "Yes, that's how I feel, but how do I keep myself aloof and yet have this relationship with those below me so that they'll accomplish what I need them to?"
I'm gonna go backwards on this for a moment
Okay.
because the first thing that pops in my head and most people's head is authenticity, right? That's the buzzword nowadays. And everybody's, you want to be authentic, you want to be relatable. Yes, but to a degree, depending on what field or niche you're in. Like, think about this. If you have somebody who is a director, let's say, of some kind of security, right? And they're being authentic to their partners, you don't have time to focus on the critical mission training that you need for those environments. You're bringing home to work. And I'm not, I really despise the word uh, work life balance. We could go down the rabbit hole there. But they very much intertwine, right? But it's like you have to bring your full self in that kind of position. And you did ask me a second piece of that. Can you remind me what that question was?
How they maintain or build relationships with subordinates so that the subordinates will actually execute maybe out of loyalty instead of fear.
Mhm. So communication's going to be key, and, it's difficult when you get stuck between that rock and a hard place of only being able to tell so much of the big picture to those subordinates, and then, of course, the trickle effect from there where frontline practically feel like they know nothing. But I think that it's important to really just have those team meetings, and whether that's consistent or frequent enough that subordinates can still feel heard and valued because that's what it comes down to. People want to feel seen and heard. So if there's things going on at the lower level, that they can at least have the ear of somebody that can make a difference should they choose to. And I think that's where the loyalty really plays into is people being approachable.
Right. And certainly we see examples of that on those undercover boss shows. I don't know if you like watching those, but it's fascinating how you see those frontline workers that are kind of giving it their all because they're like so dependent on their paycheck every 2 weeks, but yet they feel like they have no connection to voice concerns or ideas
Yeah. I
with
love
anyone.
those shows. I'm friends with the one who did, Secret Millionaire. I don't
Ah,
wanna name
okay.
drop or anything, but yeah,
Okay.
it's so cool to just get in the weeds with him, and I know he had a blast doing it.
Good. Well, they pick good bosses or good owners, ones that actually seem to have a capacity to care for their staff and the people doing it. Now we started talking about the sheep farm, and then you mentioned work-life balance, and certainly being on a farm, it seems like work and life are conjoined twins. We cannot separate that.
Absolutely. Amen. I agree.
And so let's carry on down the work-life balance rabbit hole. Do you like that statement or do you disdain it?
We'll go with disdain because I think
Okay.
hate's a little too much and highly dislike isn't enough. So The the reason why is because, like you said, they're very intertwined, and it's almost like a pony show, if you will, or like a Jekyll and Hyde of trying to put 2 different hats on. Well, if things are falling apart at home, you're not going to show up as your best self because you still have that script playing in the background. If things are garbage at work, you're gonna bring that stress home even unintentionally. So, yeah, they're absolutely intertwined. Call it the juggling act. It's like a circus.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes work is the circus and other times home is the circus. As the saying goes, not my circus, not my monkeys. It's hard when you're so invested into both. And I remember Joel Osteen talking about this not making work calls once you walk through the door at the end of your day. Uh, what are might be some of those techniques that somebody could use who wants to be fully invested at work during those times, but then when they come home, they want to be fully invested in their family?
So, I actually have a friend who does this consistently, and I really admire the approach. And the approach is literally he tells people ahead of time what those expectations are. So that in of itself is a very strong boundary to draw. And I give him kudos to do that so that people aren't calling him during, the sacred family time, unless it's an emergency. Um, but just being intentional, maybe leave the phone in another room, um, you know, putting it like on a ringer that you could still hear if change the tone to the ring, right? You can do that, and so then you know if it's somebody that you really need to be picking up the phone for, and if it's not a ring like that, get to it, when dinner's
Yes,
over.
that's right. And there were some periods in my broadcasting life where I would say, I know that the only time I'm not working is when I'm asleep. And so I took solace in that actually, but it's hard when you're working with people in different time zones and you're getting contacted by ideas and conversations and things like that. But
Yeah, and since we're all high achievers here, I would always say, "I will sleep when I'm dead." That was, like, my go-to phrase, and then I realized, you know what, that's really, really not strategic thinking. Because if I go too fast, 100 miles an hour all the time, I'm gonna
yeah,
be dead a heck of a lot sooner, and
that's right.
I don't want that, so
Right. And we'll run out of fuel. And
yeah.
uh the I guess kind of the maybe a subconscious point I was saying by that is I needed to have a shut off moment and a turn on time. and I was trying to ensure that there was at least 8 hours, maybe 7, where they couldn't bother me with their questions and suggestions. Um, now, my then a question for you is that you have openly shared that your passion stems from being afforded a second chance at life and identity. So, for those business owners listening who feel like maybe they've blown their shot due to a failed venture or a bad partnership or personal mishap, they said the wrong thing, as I've been apt to do. How do they begin rebuilding rebuilding a future from absolute scratch?
How personal do you want me to get? How much time do we have?
But yeah, how much time do we have? Wait, we got at least 20 minutes.
uh, so how would you I'll give my example.
Okay.
Um, I was in the middle of nursing school, was involved in a very tragic crash. And so when that point came and blindsided me and debilitated me, quite frankly, mentally, I had to figure out how to pick myself up and continue, even though, there was a lot surrounding that. And what I had to learn to do, which this also applies if there's been a perceived failure or setback, is forgive myself. Because even if have felt like I've failed, the only way I fail is if I don't take action to correct that and learn from it. If I just stay there and stay stuck, that's a failure.
So, ladies and
Perfect.
gentlemen, we do have a comment section. We love to read those comments, and perhaps you just want to like express yourself a little bit in relation to what we've been talking about today. And one of those questions is, Michael, how do I get in touch with your guest? So, Dr. Shana, how do people get in touch with you?
My website, so it'll be www.shanaclancy.com. I spell my name a little crazy, so you might want to click on it. But all my socials, come hang out.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, my mom always said, "What is it? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten."
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And it's we can't if you want to sum up to the number, add up to the number 5 and you're only working with twos, you're never going to get there. You got to find a 3 or a 1 somewhere along the way to get there. And so that might come from having to change who we hang out with or who where we focus, spend our focus. What is some of that advice or maybe a case study that you might have of someone who it finally dawned on that, oh man, I've got to change some of the variables that I'm working with even in my own life if I want different results.
Yes, I was working with a postal exec, and he would come in every morning, not check his email, not check his phone, and he's a talker. So he would hit the floor and people would be reaching out to him and he'd have no idea, right? And in working with him, gave him the opportunity to realize that maybe time blocking would be good, right? Because I'm never going to tell somebody what to do. If I do that, most people get resistant. They're not going to take it anyhow. So it's just about like having these general conversations. And I always say, are you open to a suggestion? Because that puts somebody in the posture of power so that they can be ready to accept that. Or maybe, hey, I really am not. So then you squash that. And so it came down to him for time blocking, to be intentional, to be the most productive person instead of feeling like he was running around chasing his tail for 10 hours plus a day, which then, filtered over into his family. So it was the basis of everything was coming up with time blocking chunks and sticking to them. He
Yes.
became very, very successful and wasn't exhausted as much. Just that easy shift.
Right. Yeah, it almost sounds like he was really a people person and really wanted to connect with people on the
Yes.
floor. And Yeah, he just needed, like you say, he needed to compartmentalize his days, kind of like how some might have to do with their emotions. Um, Now, one of the key phrases that I discovered in my research and preparing for this is that trauma informed leadership. And it's becoming, I guess, a popular phrase. And maybe many professionals, they don't actually know how to apply it practically in those relationships that they have. So, how do you define a trauma informed approach in a corporate setting? Maybe is this because we don't want to turn our managers into therapists.
No, we don't. That's probably out of most of their job descriptions and
That's
pay
right.
range.
Yeah.
So when it comes to just being trauma informed, I mean, it takes a bit of education or at least a training session, but it really is the foundation of being respectful first and foremost, because we don't know what people are experiencing, have experienced. But quite frankly, at work, the people show up to work, right? And that's kind of like that old school thinking, if you will, but still an expectation. So when it comes to being trauma informed, maybe, challenge yourself to look at how you're writing emails, the wording. If it's a subordinate, this is so common. I'll give an example of, let me think. Okay, so say you have somebody that is a subordinate and you ask them or you direct them to do something. They're going to do it, right? Because if not, they're going to be probably discharged with the pink slip. But let's put it in a veteran context because I have seen this happen. So you have a superior and say they're working in a civilian side and that superior asks them to do something and their peers are there. And let's say that it is about leading a PTSD group. And this person has shared multiple times, and the superior is aware because they've talked about it, that this person, I don't want to say struggle, but is working through PTSD, right? So now you've put them in this compromising position because of that undertone expectation of you're going to do this. And a way to kind of flip that to be a little bit more trauma informed, would you be okay? Like just kind of checking in, or if there's multiple people, you know, keep it open. Is there somebody that would like to lead this group? So you're not just singling somebody out that could go into, a panic attack during the group.
That makes sense. Almost even just in how one might frame the question of, I need you to, as opposed to, how would you feel about, yeah. So really choosing our words wisely.
Yeah. Having that opportunity for dialogue to actually both people walk away comfortable, I guess, might be the way to say it. Yeah.
It's trying to find some wins instead of
Yes.
some problems. Now, some old school leaders um, might hear a term like psychological safety and roll their eyes or think it implies a lack of accountability or softness. How does integrating the empathy and that emotional intelligence actually drive peak performance and boost an organization's bottom line?
Yeah. You're 100% correct. Psychological safety. When people hear that, they're turned off, just like mindset, right? They're like, oh, these are all fluff words. I don't have time for that. But the reality is, an organization, right, is always going to focus on numbers. So you've got to tie it back to the ROI, you've got to tie it back to the baseline, and you've got to tie it back to the revenue. Because if it's not, uppers really aren't going to be as empathetic. I'll put it nicely that way. But organizations are only as strong as their people. And so if your people aren't in a good space, then you're not going to get the maximization. I just made that word up. You're not going to maximize their potential and really get your money's worth out of that person. And so that would be a way to start reconsidering looking at how you how that directly relates to the bottom line. Plus, it takes a lot of money to retrain somebody and replace that position. And so, if you can keep somebody, that is also going to help with those numbers and statistics. So, what does that look like? It looks like people being able to bring up ideas that they have, which I alluded to previously, that open communication between, executives and, maybe lower managers or their subordinates, at least be willing to act like you are open to suggestions. But I always tell people if you have a suggestion, you better have a solution, especially if you're approaching somebody who's a decision maker because they do not have time to delegate something out of thin air. There's always got to be a solution with an issue.
Absolutely. So, in these high pressure business environments, leaders might face this moral injury, being forced to make maybe those decisions that might conflict their personal values. So, from a mental health perspective, how can an executive or manager uh, navigate that pressure without burning out or selling themselves out?
Yeah. So moral injury, I feel, is becoming a little more of a word that people are realizing. And for an executive to really look at what that moral injury may or may not be is just knowing what their values and ethics are, their morals, because those differ person to person. And so, in knowing individually what that looks like, the moral injury is going to come based out of that person's moral compass. And
Yes.
so it just really boils down to what they are willing or not willing to trade off for that.
That's right. And that's a question that everybody has to ask. It's kind of like somebody saying, "You're crazy," and the person responding, "Crazy like a fox." It just is a different definition of those words
And then
and
you have the people
experiences.
that moral injury is an afterthought because they've been given information that at that time was the only information they had to make a decision, and then find out on the back end that maybe it's something that really didn't align with that moral compass.
Okay, so then forgiveness might come into this conversation. Speaking of this moral injury, because you've spoken powerfully on the freedom of forgiveness and breaking chains. And so, this forgiving of self or forgiving those, some people in business might hold on to resentment towards past clients or bad partners or perhaps ourselves or coworkers. So how does carrying that resentment then physically drain someone's daily energy and focus?
Well, you're just letting that person or that scenario be a tape playing repeatedly in your head and living, free, rent free in your
Rent
head.
free?
And
Yes.
sometimes that other person doesn't even know that the tone that they had or how they come across, that they've even offended you. So they're walking around thinking things are fine. And until somebody's able to articulate, that's why I love mediation, right? Usually it's two people on two different ends, and sometimes it's just a misunderstanding. So yeah, like you said, it's forgiveness both ways, but forgiving that other person gives you space in your head back,
Right. Yeah. And that space is limited, so we have to protect it.
especially at
And
5 a.m.
yeah, that's right. And so as we're getting close to wrapping up here. Can you share maybe a success story of a client who came to you? Maybe they were mentally paralyzed by conflict or burnout, and they needed a mindset shift to allow them to reclaim their power, success, and clarity.
So I was working with a woman in Romania, and culturally very similar, but a little different, right? And so she had a ton of limiting beliefs that I saw as limiting beliefs, but my opinion doesn't matter. She was able to recognize what those were because there's not a lot of women business owners in Romania. There's not a lot of women who further education. And she ended up shattering both of those. You know, those 3D printers? Um, Romania, they had never had 3D printing anything. Nobody that was a hub for 3D printing. And this was just last year I was working with her. So I was also mind blown because I didn't know that they didn't have 3D printers. She actually became the first person allowed to distribute 3D printers in Romania. So I would say that that's a very successful story when the odds are stacked against her in the first place.
Yes. So if you could give our audience one maybe actionable tool, little Swiss Army knife, to master their focus and step out of survival mode the moment that their feet hit the floor in the morning, what would it be?
Gratitude. I would say whatever number you love, probably not like at 50 or something, but maybe come up with
7.
like 3 things. There
Sure.
you go. 7's a good number. Um, just a few things in the morning that you're thankful for and, 3 things that you can do or have on your radar to make a difference in somebody's life because that actually holds more weight than what we consider being successful.
That's good. Love that. Gratitude. It's such a great thing. And one of the other things that we talk about here for mornings and setting up our mornings is that there's one chapter in the book of Proverbs for every day on the calendar. And I know that has worked extremely well for me. I keep, you read and say, oh, that's why I'm having the problem. There you go. So, what a delightful conversation we've had. And thank you so much for getting into this conversation, perhaps the trenches, depending on where we are with us today, and sharing your heart and your experience. Thanks so much for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I hope your audience finds some value in our discussion today.
Absolutely. I hope so too. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you're listening, perhaps you consider yourself part of the 5 a.m. podcast community. If you're ready to stop just surviving and you want to shatter some limiting beliefs and maybe import some 3D printers into your country, uh, could be taking your professional positioning to that next level. You can connect with Dr. Shanea, and you can head over right now to her central hub at ShaneaClancy.com. We'll have that in the show notes for you. You can explore her courses, the workbooks, the custom transformation tools. Uh, like I said, we'll put that link into the show notes along with her social media channels. You can connect directly there as well. So if today's episode has shifted your perspective or given you the clarity that you've been searching for, please share this episode with a colleague or a friend. Write down in the comments. We'd love for that as well. And don't forget to hit that follow button on the 5am podcast where you listen to us. So get out there, master your focus, protect your team's psychological safety, and remember the return on investment for considering someone's emotions. And when we seize our days, we seize our future. So please get out there and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all your beautiful adventures in between. I'm Michael Klassen, and I'll see you on the next 5am podcast. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com.